OCT in epiretinal pathologies, functional correlation and comparison with OFFA findings.
From where? Okay. Thank you, Kerobi, for having me here. Till the time we see what Dr. Dubey has, that dream retina in aquarium, will suffice to learn about what normal we see nowadays. I'll not go into these details because this has been covered very nicely. As of today, we see OCT based on 3 layers of this cell bodies and 2 layers of synapses. Cell bodies are outer nuclear, inner nuclear and ganglion cell, and synapses are between corresponding layers. This is how a normal anatomy looks like, starting from RPE way down to internal limiting membrane. This grey thing is the Muller cell. These are the 3 layers, the rods and cones, the bipolar cells and the ganglion cells. This is what a histopathology looks like, and this is how the OCT looks like, the corresponding layers of retina. Based on this artificial color coding, what is red is highly reflective, what is green is in between, and then blue is the least reflective, and black is a vacant space. So this is the retinal pigment epithelium, which is a highly reflective structure. Next is the ISOS junction, and then next is the external limiting membrane. Till this level we call as the outer retina, and from here till the ganglion cell we call it as the inner retina, and beyond this is the vitreoretinal interface. So pathologies of OCT can be classified broadly under 3 headings. One is an outer retinal pathology. This is how I read an OCT. Inner retinal pathology and interface pathologies. Just briefly I'll mention outer retinal pathologies are something like central serous retinopathy, macular degeneration, IPCV. These are some examples. You see the outer retina, that is the RPE, and the photoreceptor layer is disturbed here. Similarly, here it is the primarily outer retina. You see the inner retina by and large is okay. The macular edema, which we keep talking about in various studies also, BRVO, CRVO, diabetic retinopathy studies, or inflammatory edema, affects these middle layers of the inner retina. This is a cystoid edema here. This is a typical, cystoid with subretinal fluid here. This is again a sectorial pathology, one vascular block here. This is again a patient of vascular block. The OCT is showing a very highly reflective edema here, opacification in the inner layers of retina. This is a patient who has a CRA, and after conservative treatment, this returns to normal looking OCT. So this was the first time I did OCT in a patient who has a CRA, and documented this. Coming to the talk proper, because Kerobi told me to give few slides of a normal OCT and how do we read OCT. 3 types, outer retina, inner retina and interface. I will be deliberating upon these 3 common pathologies of VMT as well as macular hole, which are basically, and to my thinking, OCT has a great role to study this interface, one of the areas where it throws wealth of information in interface pathologies. And the other talk was about correlation with FA. Believe me, FA in interface pathologies, normally we don't order FA in such interface pathologies. And even if we do FA for some reason, the correlation between them is very, very poor. Meaning thereby FA, which is a dynamic angiographic procedure where you inject dye, the correlation with structural this thing is very poor. So therefore I have frankly speaking not included. I hardly do any angiograms where we expect traction to be the component. So therefore I have not included angiograms in this. To understand the interface pathologies, the concept of PVD has to be understood. And this is important because this has undergone a sea change in our thought process. We know about this anatomy of vitreous. Normally, this cortical vitreous is adherent to ILM with firm adhesions at disc margin, base, vessels, and variable adhesion at the macula. At the edge of the perifovea, it is the densely adherent, then it may be weakly adherent in between. So with age, what happens is, or with other things like trauma, diabetes, two things generally occur at this interface, at this vitreous. One is liquefaction, which keeps occurring with time. Another is the weakening of adhesion between the cortical vitreous and the internal limiting membrane. This weakening between the cortical, this allows the liquid vitreous to seep in through a anatomical hole, the micro leak, and this enters the retrohyaloid space and initiates this process of perifoveal PVD. These processes of liquefaction and this loosening of adhesions can be accelerated by aging, by eye movements, by trauma, or by some disease. And believe me, once this starts, this is a stimulus for cells, either the astrocytes or the hyelocytes or other cells, to play nuisance in this area. So once the cells come here on the surface, they play nuisance with this, and this is compounded by breakdown of blood-retinal barrier or the inner blood-retinal barrier. This results in exudation of proteins and serum, which ultimately results in membrane formation. So this slide is the most important slide of my talk, that how this interface gets affected. And PVD, which was initially perceived to be an acute event, is with the advent of OCT, understanding the pathomechanisms, there is increasing evidence, if you keep following up vertically your patients, that PVD actually occurs gradually over months and years. PVD, as I said, begins as a localized separation from the perifoveal area, like this, slowly progresses over years, and this early stage of PVD is the stimulus for all this idiopathic macular disorders and membrane formation and all this VR, vitreoretinal interface abnormalities. These are the various stages of PVD. One is this perifoveal PVD with residual vitreofoveal adhesion here. There is a small adhesion here, and once this is off, we call it perifoveal PVD with no vitreofoveal adhesion. And this is a nearly complete PVD with vitreopapillary adhesion only remaining here. And last stage is complete PVD. The various interface abnormalities like epiretinal membrane, the macular hole, vitreomacular traction syndrome, tractional cystoid macular edema, macular schisis, tractional diabetic macular edema, are all these macular complications of this initial peri. Therefore, I took some time to explain this concept of perifoveal PVD. Before OCT, the terms used were appearance of taut hyaloid face or early ERM, and we were not very sure. But with OCT coming up, I think these terms are better refined now, and no one uses taut hyaloid face as the term. It is more scientific and logical. As Dr. Duber said, never study OCT in isolation. All of these imaging modalities have to be studied clinically, correlated clinically, and not only OCT. Vitreoretinal interface patterns, adhesion patterns could be focal or could be multifocal depending on how they are adhering. And vitreomacular traction syndrome is a complication, as I said, of partial PVD, where vitreous is separated from the retina throughout the palatal fundus, but remains adherent at the posterior pole around the macular area and the optic nerve. This often is a broad dumbbell-shaped region. And as I said, the stimulus is there for other cells to misbehave and react. Is it time over? I'll just take 2 minutes more. And I'll just take. And once this residual cells start misbehaving, anterior posterior tractional force is added onto it and complicates, and this causes CME. This is the BMT I was talking about. Vitreous is adherent in a broad, often dumbbell-shaped region encompassing this macular area and resulting in CME. This is the other pattern where it has pulled in the AP direction, anterior posterior direction, and there is a distortion and edema of the fovea and adjacent retina. This could, in more severe cases, result in retinoschisis or maculoschisis and macular detachment also. And once we surgically release this, or sometimes rarely spontaneously it may happen, this facilitates faster resolution of macular thickening, that is, anatomy gets restored, but functional improvement still may not be there or may take slightly longer time. These are various vitreoretinal interface abnormalities or tractional forces, primarily anterior-posterior traction. This is the hyaloid, vitreous hyaloid, which is thickened and pulling the retina. In idiopathic VMT, the anterior-posterior vector is the primary force. But in VMT, which is complicated by breakdown of barriers, the tangential force often complicates this traction. Epiretinal membrane, the second pathology, could be idiopathic or secondary to various pathologies. And Okay. Two patterns of ERM could be identified. One is focal attachment, another is a globally diffuse ERM. Believe me, OCT may not be able to identify the presence of ERM, which was diagnosed clinically by tortuous vessels in around, say, 10% of patients. This is what I was talking about, focally adherent ERM. This green line, what you see here, is the hyaloid, which is detached. And this red is the epiretinal membrane, which is focally adherent here. In between there are spaces. In between it is not adherent. Here again ERM is there. This is a globally adherent reflective membrane all across the surface of the retina. This is again showing this kind of ERM could be missed in the OCT once it is absolutely adherent and the thickness again may be normal. Here, clinical importance of dragged vessels will show that you have a globally adherent ERM. One can almost, most of the times differentiate a detached hyaloid face which causes vitreomacular traction. This is a green colored in a color coded OCT, a minimally reflective membrane compared to an ERM which is a stronger, thicker cellular membrane which gives a stronger reflection. This is again the same slide. You can differentiate between a process of VMT which this can cause, or epiretinal membrane traction which this can cause. This is a patient who has this ERM. OCT is also useful for following the treatment. You can study this, and also for natural history of ERM. Couple of clinical slides. This gentleman had an obvious ERM. You show this multifocal ERM, and here it is densely adherent here. Subjected to usual vitreoretinal surgery. No ILM was peeled in this. The only thing was a PVD induction and separation of hyaloid. Believe me, it is very risky to peel ILM, and if you do that with Tanos, diamond dusted stretcher, or even with a pinch forceps, the functional results definitely suffer. Another patient who has this adherent ERM, and after a couple of weeks, in fact this photograph is after 2 weeks, the anatomy is restored, but patient vision is still unsatisfactory. This was relatively a simpler case. The anatomy is restored. Function also in this patient was recovered to 6/12. I'll just skip through because it's just repetitive of the same ERMs. This patient had a severe edema along with the ERM. Another patient who had a combined surgery. This was the best result actually which we obtained very recently, a normal contour restored after ERM surgery. Coming to the third pathology which I want to discuss was macular hole and OCT. The whole classification has changed after GAS had given the original classification of macular hole. Macular hole have received the greatest recognition in the literature of VR disorders, and they can help in differential diagnosis between pseudo holes, lamellar holes, and cysts. And they are invaluable in pre-op assessment. Sometimes prognostication also can be done, and to study the pathogenesis of various traction forces, OCT plays a role. The staging, what OCT, how stages macular hole is stage 1A, where there is a foveal splitting and not detachment, as GAS had hypothesized. We had those yellow dot sign or yellow ring sign. This is a pseudocyst which is visible on OCT. The stage 1B is pseudocyst enlarges but extension to the outer retina, but the roof is intact. So this is stage 1B. Stage 2 is once the hole is full thickness macular hole, but the size is say less than 400 microns with posterior hyaloid remaining attached. This is stage 2A, and once it with free operculum, this is stage 2B, full thickness less than 400 with free operculum. And this is stage 3, where there is a fully developed macular hole with or without operculum, but the size of the macular hole is bigger than 400 microns. This in nutshell is summarizing various stages of macular hole. The pseudo hole what we see is secondary to ERM, and the characteristic is that it's because of the centrifugal contraction of the ERM, it causes steepening of this contour of the fovea, which leads to appearance of a macular hole clinically. This is actually not a macular hole and should not be touched by surgery at all. The neurosensory retina here is intact, but there is a globally adherent ERM. This is a full thickness macular hole. You see how the margins are sloping here, and this is a pseudo-macular hole because of ERM. There is no ERM in this pathology, although they can coexist also. In a lot of macular pathologies you have ERM also. This is a lamellar hole, which is a break in the inner fovea, here, separation of inner and outer retinal layers, but has not reached the level of RPE, and there is an absence of full thickness defect, and the photoreceptors are intact here. Again, surgery for lamellar macular hole, unless patient is very, very symptomatic, is generally not recommended. Couple of examples of full thickness macular hole. I am sure this audience is very well versed with this. This is gas here, and the hole is closed here. Another example of macular hole, full thickness macular hole with lot of edema in the leaflet here. This is closed. I'll just rush through this because this does not add anything new to this. This is taken after 1 day. The only thing is there are closure patterns after macular surgery described, which is described by Kang into two types: type 1 closure and type 2 closure. Type 1 closure is where there is no neurosensory retinal defect, as in this. There is no neurosensory retinal defect. However, if you see this, there is a neurosensory retinal defect. So obviously type 1 has better visual acuity post-op. There have been various indices described based on OCT, just in an attempt to prognosticate the visual recovery. There is hole formation factor and macular hole index. The third is minimal diameter on OCT. To my working experience, I think the minimal diameter on OCT helps the best. Hole formation factor is too complex and does not yield much of information. But for completing this topic, C plus D upon A is what is described as hole formation factor, and what has been described is that if it is more than 0.9, the closure rate is higher. But I think minimal diameter on OCT, if it is say more than seems to be a better predictor than HFF. So in conclusion, after having discussed vitreoretinal adhesions, the genesis based on perifoveal PVD, all these three things, VMTs and this adhesion patterns and macular hole, OCT plays a very important or an adjunct role in diagnosis, in differential diagnosis of pseudo hole, lamellar hole, sometimes in subtle cases where you are not understanding what you are dealing with, sometimes understanding the pathogenesis of these conditions, and also post-op evaluation. Maybe in prognostication, if you can see this ISOS junction and the external limiting membrane, these patients definitely functionally they do better, apart from restoration of anatomy, which does occur in most of these patients. Thank you very much.